From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
An apparent assassination attempt against Donald Trump fails for the second time in 2 months. What does it mean for the Secret Service as well as for the election campaign? Plus, leaks from inside the Supreme Court take aim at Chief Justice John Roberts, portraying him as out to help Donald Trump. Is that accurate? And what's going on at the High Court? Welcome to Potomac Watch. I'm Paul Gigot, editor of the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, and I'm here with my colleagues, Kim Strassel and Colin Levy. Welcome to you both. Well, let's start with what the FBI says they are investigating as an assassination attempt against Donald Trump at his West Palm Beach golf course in Florida. Ryan Wesley Ruff was arrested on Sunday and on Monday was charged with possession of a firearm as a felon, former convicted felon, and possession of a firearm for shaving off the serial numbers on that weapon. These look to be merely the beginning of potential charges against Ruth. He was arrested after fleeing the scene after being confronted on the golf course a few hundred yards from where Trump was golfing and headed toward Ruff, confronted by a Secret Service agent. He fled, leaving behind an AK-style rifle, a GoPro camera for filming and perhaps streaming whatever he had in mind, and body armor. Ruff seems like an odd and troubled person, arrested multiple times for various offenses. Trump's response was to thank the Secret Service and Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw, and we will see what else he has to say sometime today. I assume he will. We don't know a lot more about the gunman, Colin, but what does this tell you about the Secret Service and its ability to protect the president?
Yeah, I mean, I think by all accounts here, Paul, as far as we know, at least thus far, this incident was handled exactly the way you'd hope it would be. You know, the Secret Service had eyes on the perimeter of Donald Trump's location. They spotted a threat. This guy was actually a few holes down from where Donald Trump was. So they were, looks like most likely sweeping the area ahead of him. The Secret Service detail opened fire on the suspect who was clearly there to do harm to the former president. It's unclear right now whether or not the suspect actually fired any shots. But remember, the standard for Secret Service engagement is that they can take out any imminent threat to the president. And there's no question that this man was an imminent threat and that the Secret Service acted correctly. So in some ways, this is an all's well that ends well story. I think the bigger concern here for me is that we may be entering a phase of the kind of copycat violence for presidential assassinations that we've otherwise seen proliferating with school shootings, where gunmen are seeking some personal glory. And that's one thing I noted when I saw that this guy had a GoPro with him. That's just really sick.
And of course, the Secret Service response immediately to shoot at Routh, in contrast to what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, where the Secret Service was widely criticized for not responding quickly before the 20-year-old gunman in that case could fire at the president, hitting him in his ear and, of course, killing a person attending the rally and wounding others. Let's listen to President Biden have his response to the event on Sunday, and then Speaker of the House Michael Johnson.
Thank God the president's okay. I think we got a full report so far. We're down there tonight. But one thing I want to make clear, the service needs more help. And I think the Congress should respond to their needs if they, in fact, need more services. So that's what we're going to be talking about.
Are you concerned more rhetorically in this environment? They need more personnel. They need more money. What kind of help do you say?
I think we need some more personnel. I think they may decide whether they need more personnel or not.
We need accountability. We must demand that this job is being done. I think there are some really patriotic, great people working in the Secret Service, but it's the leadership. We have no faith. I have no faith in Secretary Mayorkas. We impeached him in the House, as you know, but Chuck Schumer made it die in the Senate. So we've got to get accountability. We're working on it every day, and President Trump deserves every measure of that.
Well, Kim, is it a question of more resources, as the president says, or accountability or lack thereof, particularly with the Department of Homeland Security, where the Secret Service is located in the bureaucratic hierarchy?
We're hearing something that I think is a little bit different than maybe both of those takes. And by the way, my view on this is that the Secret Service has gotten lucky for both of these incidents. In Butler, we had Thomas Matthew Crooks, who was only 400 feet away from the president with a scope and a rifle and did manage to hit him in the ear. He didn't die. I think the Secret Service response to that was too slow, but they did get him away safely. In this particular incident, let's be honest. Yes, the Secret Service is good, but we were fortunate that this one agent was so on the ball that he saw a rifle poking through the trees. Again, you had a rifleman who was in 400 yards of the president. You just don't want scenarios like that where you are ending up having to rely on hopefully somebody seeing something at the right time. You don't want that threat to get near a president or a presidential candidate at all. So that gets to this question of resources. And to me, the most interesting thing that came out of this, Palm Beach County Sheriff Rick Bradshaw, when he was speaking yesterday, was saying, look, the Secret Service did what they were supposed to do for someone who is not the president, meaning we have two levels of how Secret Service manages those that are under their care. This sheriff said if the president of the United States, Joe Biden, had been there, there would have been somebody along every inch of the perimeter of this golf course. It would have been completely locked down. We have a different standard for people who are former presidents, people who are running for the presidency. I think given the active threats, we're going to have to rethink whether or not that standard isn't raised for both Kamala Harris, for Donald Trump, maybe for former presidents. Then that gets into the question of whether or not the Secret Service has the resources that it needs and if Congress is adequately funding it. But I think we at least have to acknowledge what the problem is. And that to me was news and interesting because the Secret Service hasn't kind of acknowledged that in the past. They've said, we take all of this seriously. But it would sound from this and the discussion that there are different levels of protection.
All right, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we'll have more on the apparent attempt to assassinate Donald Trump when we come back. Welcome back. I'm Paul Gigot with the Potomac Watch podcast here daily with Colin Levy and Kim Strauss. Colin, I want to take up Kim's point about the different levels of protection afforded a president and a candidate or a former president. I think a former president, you can understand much less protection required. But in this case, particularly given the previous attempt on Donald Trump's life, you have to wonder, Secret Service did beef up its coverage of Trump, the candidate and former president. But nonetheless, this guy was able to set up in a potential firing position right by the golf course. The streets around it, busy area, was able to get in there. And granted, as you pointed out, the Secret Service did sweep ahead and was able to detect apparently because of a gun barrel sticking out from the foliage. But what if this had been somebody who was a real pro and knew how to cover himself? You could have had a situation which was much worse.
I agree. This was an unpleasantly close call. There's no question about that. This guy was quite literally lying in wait for the president. And I agree with Kim that there certainly should be a comparable, if not even more heightened level of coverage for former President Trump now, because we know that he's now been the target of 2 assassination attempts. So there should be no differential in the amount of coverage that he's getting. But I think what we're talking about here also gets to this resources level. And one thing we know about the Secret Service is that they have a very high attrition rate. And because of that attrition rate, you end up with people in positions of authority. And we did see this with a previous analysis of the Secret Service handling of the Butler, Pennsylvania attempted shooting. You have people who are in positions of authority who have less experience. So that's something that I think really needs to be considered as we sort of talk about beefing up or moving the perimeter out or, all of these other things that we could consider here to bring a little bit more reassurance to how the Secret Service is handling things.
Colin, are you saying that there's a real competence issue here? A capability issue at the Secret Service?
I'm not sure if I'm saying that it's a competence issue, but I am saying that I think there needs to be real consideration of whether or not the Secret Service has enough manpower. The real key for the Secret Service are its its agents, and it's their intelligence and their experience and their field experience. I mean, those things can't be replicated with money, quite frankly. You just need the guys who and the women who know what they're doing and know how to handle these situations and have that sixth sense ability to anticipate threats that are beyond a gun barrel sticking through a fence.
And I should say you had experience watching the Secret Service when you were working inside the Bush White House for a time. And, obviously presidential level protection is so much greater than anything else. But we're in this environment where if these cases, the one in Butler and now this one in Florida, turn out to be just kind of lone gunmen who, for whatever reason, political motivations, perhaps in this case, perhaps not, just attention getting, desire, that's one thing. And that's bad enough. But what happens if you had a real group of assassins who were bent at the behest of a domestic political group or perhaps a foreign state going after a president or a candidate, Donald Trump? We would have a very bad situation. So it does lead me to believe that maybe there are more resources necessary. And now, at least between now and the election, both Kamala Harris, Kim, and Donald Trump just need this heightened level of protection without question in my mind. Because if we get an assassination after all this, in any event, even without this, but now with this, it is going to be one hell of a dangerous period in American politics.
Oh, absolutely. And, you just laid out my nightmare scenario. The thing that really scares me is a foreign operation with people who are actually trained. Because let's be honest, Thomas Matthew Crooks, he was a kid. He clearly knew his way around firearms, but he hadn't had any military training, for instance. This guy, from what we know, the same thing. He looks to be a bit of an attention seeker, but again, no military training. Both of these, if you really step back and look at it, a bit of planning that went into it, but then again, a bit rookie. I want to imagine, as you said, a group of assassins with true special ops training and how that would play out given what clearly is not enough resources that are being devoted to this. One thing that I do think is a really good news is at a time when we are very divided, Congress and those who are focused on this do seem to be doing a grown-up job of looking at this. Democrat Jason Crow and Republican Mike Kelly are running this task force in the House. They are interviewing all the right people, looking at all the right things. The Senate Homeland Security Department is. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is opening his own investigation into what happened since it happened in Florida. Hopefully, we come out of this in soon with some good policy answers for what needs to be done, and that we manage to continue to avoid politicizing this because it's a threat to both sides. And look, if anything happened to either of these candidates right now, the blow up in this country, the fallout, domestic unrest would be so huge. And I think that's something everyone needs to consider.
And I would add a dose of transparency in this investigation because conspiracy theories in these kinds of cases spread rapidly, particularly in the age of social media. And I mean, there are still people out there who claim that there was a second gunman in the John F. Kennedy assassination. So let's not go down that road.